At exactly 3:20 a.m. on August 28, 2025, alarms of history were set to ring. In Teryak Bay, a Russian Buyan-M warship, valued at nearly $80 million, docked after returning from a Kalibor strike mission. On board sat 8 Kalibor cruise missiles, each weighing almost 4,400 pounds, costing over $1 million, and capable of striking targets up to 950 miles away at near supersonic speed. Officers on deck moved with the confidence of men convinced they were untouchable, standing inside what Moscow proudly called a rear area fortress. Around them, Podlet K-1 radars swept the horizon, while Pantsir S-1 launchers rested ready, floodlights casting long shadows across the armored hull. But just 3 miles offshore, a speedboat disguised as a fishing vessel crept forward at barely 20 knots. Beneath its tarps, not nets or crates of herring, but 2 fiberglass drones, no larger than a man, each armed with an armor-piercing warhead designed to pierce steel plating. In minutes, this fragile boat would challenge the pride of the Black Sea Fleet. Was this supreme confidence Russia's strength, or its greatest mistake? Teryak Bay was once considered completely safe. For years, Russia had turned this bay into a fortified base. Radars on the shore, scanning day and night, air defense guns and missiles guarding the piers. For Moscow, the Buyan-M corvette anchored that night was simply resupplying inside a protective shell. It carried 8 Kalibor cruise missiles, the very weapons that had struck Ukrainian cities for months. But that confidence became its weakness. Ukraine understood that to break the cycle of strikes, this ship had to be stopped inside the harbor. A single strike would be unlikely to succeed because the bay's defenses were built to detect and shoot down large targets. If only one drone was used to both blind the radar and hit the launchers, it would have to be a large UAV, like an MQ-9 Reaper or other heavy loitering munitions. Such drones use big engines, make more noise, give off more heat, and are easily detected from afar, allowing Panzer systems to lock on and destroy them. The costs, logistics, and political risks are also far higher. That is why Ukraine chose to split the mission between 2 small, cheap drones that were harder to notice, one to blind the radar, the other to strike the launcher. This method increased the chance of success and provided backup if one drone was shot down. At 3:27 a.m., a wooden boat disguised as a fishing vessel quietly approached the pier. On radar, it showed up as a faint dot, nothing worth attention. In reality, under its tarp were 2 small FPV drones, each just over a meter long, powered by quiet electric motors and armed with armor-piercing charges. They were not big, not loud, but remotely guided with precision. The first, codenamed Haram, launched from the boat's stern. Its mission was not to sink the ship, but to blind it, diving straight into the radar mast and cables. If the radar failed, the crew would lose their main eyes and be forced to switch to manual controls, which were much slower. That was the golden moment for the next strike. About 40 seconds later, the second drone, codenamed Vid Plata, launched. It flew from a different angle, aiming directly at the ship's missile launchers. While the defenses were still reeling from the loss of radar, Vid Plata could approach with almost no resistance. If it hit, the ship's entire weapon system would be disabled. In a control center hundreds of kilometers away, Ukrainian operators watched the video feed. The ship's deck appeared clearly on the screen. Ladders, tarped containers, sailors moving under floodlights. The countdown ticked down meter by meter, second by second. No one on the deck knew that in moments, their floating fortress would lose its eyes and then its weapons. What do you think Russia could have done in those few short seconds before the second drone arrived? In reality, Russia had almost no time to act. Just seconds later, the second drone slammed into the launcher bay and turned the corvette into a burning hull. At 3:32 a.m., the second strike landed. Vid Plata approached from the port side, veering at a precise 25-degree angle, and buried itself into launch bay number 3. The blast ripped the hatch free, ignited fuel lines, and scattered molten fragments across the center deck. A thick plume of smoke rose into the night sky as fire licked into the missile compartment. With the radar destroyed and the Panzer's console in flames, the Buyan-M was no longer a warship. It was a drifting hull, stripped of its most lethal assets. The tilt to starboard, 3 to 5 degrees, was subtle but unmistakable. It revealed flooding inside technical compartments that even emergency valves could not stop. Fire crews fought to contain the blaze, but the damage was permanent. 8 caliber cruise missiles, worth over $8 million and designed to strike deep into Ukraine, were now nothing more than disabled steel tubes. In less than 7 minutes, a vessel once capable of projecting power across nearly 1,000 miles had been reduced to silence. For Ukraine's command centers, this was more than a tactical kill. It was the collapse of a myth that Russian inland ports were untouchable. Teryak Bay, once branded a fortress, had been breached by 2 drones costing less than $4,000 in total. Independent analysts soon confirmed the cost ratio, 1 to 500, a figure so extreme it threatened to rewrite the calculus of naval warfare. The message traveled far beyond the Sea of Azov. NATO observers noted the precedent. If Ukraine could strike here, then no port in Crimea or along the Black Sea coast could be assumed secure. Internationally, the operation was read as a doctrinal signal. Small, expendable systems, when synchronized and precisely targeted, could neutralize platforms worth tens of millions. It was asymmetric warfare distilled to its essence: intelligence, timing, and the will to strike first. And for the future of naval warfare, a question now hangs heavy. Are massive warships still symbols of power, or relics waiting to be broken by drones no larger than a man? Before we move to the escalation, let us know where you're watching from. It shows how global this story truly is. At 3:32 a.m., Vidplata's warhead tore into the launcher bay, and the Buyan-M convulsed as if struck by a hammer. Fire leapt upward in jagged tongues, shards of steel rained across the deck, and a rolling column of smoke began to pour from the corvette's midsection. For a moment there was shock, a frozen silence broken only by alarms shrieking in every compartment. Then came the response. Sailors surged into action. Men in scorched uniforms grabbed extinguishers, while others dragged heavy hoses across blistering steel plates, their gloves smoking from the heat. The deck tilted a few degrees to starboard as water rushed into compartments below, but still the crew fought back. Every clang of boots on metal and every hiss of carbon dioxide flooding into the launcher bay testified to training and discipline holding firm under fire. What unfolded was no quiet disaster. It was a battlefield at sea, a storm of flame and desperation exploding inside Russia's supposed floating fortress. Flames curled along the deck rails, licking into storage lockers and forcing sailors to smash them open with axes before they ignited. The missile bay, once the heart of the corvette's striking power, was now a furnace, glowing red from within. Firefighters in heavy gear hauled lines through the narrow gangways, blasting high-pressure water into the inferno. Steam burst upward in white clouds, momentarily cloaking the men as if they were fighting inside a storm. Carbon dioxide from the automatic suppression system poured into the compartment, hissing like a giant serpent, choking out smaller fires, but failing to stop the deep burn of ruptured fuel lines. Some sailors staggered back with scorched jackets and blistered skin, while medics scrambled to treat them on the open deck. Bandages were wrapped with hands trembling from heat exhaustion. Morphine syringes were jabbed into arms, and stretchers slid across the tilted floor. Despite the chaos, order prevailed. No one abandoned their post. Some clung to valves to keep them from spinning loose under pressure. Others stayed crouched over pumps to hold auxiliary power steady. In the blaze and smoke, the discipline of the Russian Navy showed itself. Not in attack, but in a desperate stand to keep their ship alive. Deep inside the corvette, the command center was transformed from a hub of glowing screens into a chamber of shadows. The main consoles sparked once, then went black. Breakers tripped, fuses blew, and the hum of electronics gave way to the throb of emergency lights, casting everything in blood-red tones. The captain's chair stood amid the haze like an island, its crew clustered around, with handheld radios pressed to their ears. Orders that once flowed through sleek data networks now had to be shouted over static. A gunnery officer leaned over a charred panel, trying in vain to restart the fire control program, his fingers blackened by soot. Radar officers scrambled to bring backup systems online, only to discover their feed lines severed by the blast. Every second stretched, a battle against blindness, deafness, and the creeping fear that the ship had been gutted beyond recovery. Yet the chain of command did not dissolve. Officers scribbled notes by flashlight, runners carried verbal orders down smoky corridors, and damage reports were compiled with grim precision. In the suffocating air, where sweat and smoke stung eyes alike, the crew's discipline turned chaos into a tenuous rhythm. Proof that even crippled, the Buyan-M would not surrender easily. While the Buyan-M burned, the bay itself erupted into violence. Shore-based operators, jolted awake by the emergency call, activated every defense battery in range. Podlet K-1 radars swept the approaches, searching for more intruders. Within minutes, the sky above Teriak Bay was alive with tracers and missile exhaust. A Pantsir S-1 unit stationed near the piers swung its twin cannons skyward. Shells ripped across the night, stitching orange lines into the darkness. Seconds later, a second FPV drone, possibly part of the same strike wave, was caught in the barrage. It disintegrated mid-air, raining fragments into the sea. Crews cheered briefly, then wheeled the launchers again, aware that more could be lurking. Farther inland, a Buk M2 battery came online, radar dishes glowing pale in the haze. Its operators tracked fleeting contacts, real or imagined, while S-400 crews reported readiness from their hardened bunkers. Long white contrails slashed upward as surface-to-air missiles roared into the sky, curving out toward the open water. The air became a storm of counterfire, defensive guns hammering, missiles climbing, searchlights carving white beams across the waves. Russia was not passive. Its defenses fought with ferocity, creating a wall of fire intended to drive back any follow-on drones. Even as one corvette lay crippled, the broader system showed its teeth, determined that Teriak Bay would not fall without a fight. Hundreds of kilometers away, Ukrainian operators kept their eyes fixed on grainy FPV screens. The signal guiding Haram and Vidplata had been steady, precise, almost surgical. That precision was not accidental. Each drone, though cheap in material, was tied into navigation grids and encrypted links supplied by Western allies. Satellite positioning corrected every wobble, ensuring that even a 1-meter-long frame could slip exactly into the radar mast or missile bay. This was the paradox on display. A ship worth $80 million crippled by devices costing less than a family car. The drones themselves were fragile, but the intelligence web behind them, GPS corrections, real-time mapping, silent relay stations, made them deadly. It was technology born in Silicon Valley and American labs, quietly repurposed for war. To the Russian crew, it was as if invisible hands had guided the weapons through their defenses. Panzer batteries and Buk radars fought furiously, and some drones were indeed destroyed, but the ones that mattered arrived unscathed. They were too small, too quick, and too well-directed to miss. In those seconds, Moscow's fortress illusion fractured. Each detonation became proof of asymmetric design. Russia relied on thick armor and costly missiles, while Ukraine wielded nimble machines sharpened by Western precision. The result was devastating. What brute force could not achieve, timing and accuracy did. Across the bay, the night turned into a battlefield. Flames from the Buyan-M lit the water, while sirens wailed and tugboats churned through smoke, searchlights sweeping the harbor. Nearby vessels shifted position, some moving out, others forming a shield around the burning corvette. The quiet port became chaos. Ammo trucks pulled back, patrol boats zigzagged, soldiers rolled out new radar lines, engineers scrambled to restore comms. Civilians on the outskirts saw tracers and rocket fire, mistaking it for a full air raid. The Buyan-M smoke rose like a beacon, proof that the safe harbor had been pierced. And as the crew fought inside, commanders asked a darker question. If 2 drones caused this storm, what would happen with a swarm? By dawn, the battle was no longer confined to Teryak Bay. Within hours of the strikes, Ukraine released carefully edited drone footage. First the view from Haram as it tore into the radar mast, then the split-second impact of Vidplata against the launcher deck. The clips were short, grainy, but their symbolism was unmistakable. In Kyiv, screens lit up in public squares, and social media erupted with hashtags declaring the fortress breached. Memes compared the Buyan-M to a lumbering giant felled by 2 tiny knives. Inside Ukraine, the effect was electric. Citizens who had lived through months of Kaliber strikes now saw their tormentor gutted. The mood was not just relief, but vindication. Proof that ingenuity and daring could punish even the most expensive enemy weapons. The image of flames rising from the corvette's deck became an emblem of resistance. Russia, meanwhile, launched its own narrative. State television downplayed the attack, describing the damage as superficial and insisting the ship would be back in service soon. Anchors read statements with confidence, but viewers could see the plumes of smoke in amateur videos taken from across the bay. Residents spoke of explosions echoing for hours, sirens wailing through the night. The official line clashed sharply with lived reality. Independent naval experts widened the gap further. They pointed out the twisted radar mast, the visible tilt of the hull, the charred missile bay, evidence that the Buyan-M was crippled. Online forums filled with debates, some mocking, others alarmed, all asking the same question. If this could happen here, where else was vulnerable? Far beyond the Black Sea, analysts and leaders studied the footage. NATO logged the sequence, a radar strike followed by a launcher kill, proof that even layered defenses could be pierced by precision. Western headlines declared, 2 drones cripple $80 million warship. Journals highlighted blind zones and timing, calling it a textbook case of cost-effective warfare. U.S. officials stayed silent, but Western fingerprints, accurate navigation, encrypted links, steady control were evident. Even in Asia and the Middle East, navies asked, if 2 drones could do this, what would 20 achieve? From Moscow, the scrutiny was crushing. The Buyan-M had become a global symbol that sanctuaries were not safe. As dawn broke, tugboats hauled the Buyan-M toward deeper water, its silhouette blackened and broken. The radar mast was gone, the launcher deck gutted, yet sailors still stood watch, proof Russia had resisted, not collapsed. But the sanctuary myth was shattered. A corvette worth millions was crippled by drones costing almost nothing. For Ukraine, it was a triumph of ingenuity. For Russia, a warning that every harbor now carried risk. And for the world, one question loomed. If 2 drones could cripple a warship in minutes, what chaos would a swarm unleash? By dawn, the Buyan-M was no longer a combat ship, but a crippled hull under tow. Its radar mast had been torn apart, its fire control center incinerated, and its vertical launch bays rendered useless. What returned to Sevastopol was not a vessel capable of projecting power, but a wreck that would require weeks, perhaps months, of repairs. The fire was contained, yet the tilt to starboard remained, a visible reminder of internal flooding and hidden structural damage. The cost exchange was staggering. A corvette valued at $80 million, armed with 8 caliber missiles worth another $8 million combined, had been neutralized by 2 drones assembled for less than the price of a family car. Independent analysts confirmed the numbers, a ratio of 1 to 500, in cost efficiency. For naval planners, the lesson was clear. Power at sea was no longer secured only by steel and shipyards, but by precision, timing, and the ingenuity to exploit the smallest of blind spots. For Ukraine, the strike was a clean, tactical victory and a profound boost to morale. It proved that ingenuity and audacity could shatter myths of invulnerability. For Russia, the consequences stretched far beyond the damage to one vessel. The Buyan-M was among the few ships designed for the shallow waters of the Azov Sea. Its loss weakened Moscow's strike cycle and eroded the aura of safety that had surrounded inland ports like Teryak. From now on, every docking maneuver, every rearming operation would carry the shadow of another silent approach. Strategically, the operation confirmed that the era of large warships operating with impunity was fading. Observers compared the moment to earlier shifts in military history, when submarines first sank capital ships, or when missiles rendered battleship guns obsolete. Each turning point marked the decline of one age and the rise of another. The Buyan-M strike joined that lineage, a demonstration that small, expendable systems could rewrite naval warfare in a single night. The message was unmistakable. No fortress is absolute, no fleet untouchable. Teryak Bay, once hailed as a stronghold, had been breached by drones costing less than a guided artillery shell. The Buyan-M did not sink, but it carried something more damaging than fire or flooding: doubt. Doubt in Russia's command, doubt in the promise of safe zones, and doubt in the doctrine that placed faith in expensive surface combatants. And as Ukraine celebrated, one question spread far beyond the Black Sea. In this new era of asymmetric warfare, are warships still symbols of power, or just targets waiting for the next wave of drones? If it can happen here, could it happen anywhere? For every Navy watching, the lesson is clear. No fleet is safe. Leave your thoughts. We'll be back with more answers. See you next time.